Hello and welcome to Louis Philippe in Pursuit of Excellence. My guest today changed the course of history in the IT industry. He was awarded the Padma Bhushan by the Government of India, the CBE by the Government of Great Britain. He is an advisor to the Prime Minister of India and serves as chairman and vice chairman of numerous companies in the country. My friend S.Ramadorai. Ram, great to see you. We've gotten up in different parts of the world. You're looking younger as you get busier towards retirement age, which we would all call.
Thank you, Vijay. So nice to be here. It's always great to meet you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ram. You know, after you left being CEO and MD of TCS, it seems like you're running on a treadmill. You're running faster and faster every day.
Absolutely true. I didn't expect it that way. But I think what is most exciting is to touch the youth of this country in a small way, to make a difference to their lives, and that gives me the most satisfaction.
Well, let's go back in time a little bit. When you grew up, you were born in Nagpur. I don't think you spent that much time in Tamil Nadu, did you? I mean, you ended up doing education in Delhi. Tell us a little bit about your early life growing up.
I think I was born in Nagpur, that's correct, which was part of Madhya Pradesh at that time. Now it's a part of Maharashtra. I think the early childhood up to the grade 1 was spent in my native village close to Tanjore. And then subsequently, because my dad was in the Indian Audit and Account Service, we shifted to Delhi. So most of the schooling up to the college level was all in Delhi. But we had the opportunity to visit Tamil Nadu almost every year during the summer vacations. So our roots and being in touch with the place where we belong to was very much there. Even now it's very much there. So I make it a point to visit the village at least once every 3 years or so.
Growing up, you grew up in a large family and moved to various locations. Did that sort of give you more of a perspective as you were growing up of your youth?
I think it gave a certain extent the perspective of the youth. I think growing up with siblings is always a very exciting experience. You learn a lot, or you teach the younger ones in your own family. But more importantly, not just the siblings, which means the brothers and sisters, but the extended family of cousins was also very much part of our lives. So I think the tradition of being together, learning together, participating together, fighting together was all a way of life. So I think we grew up as a community, we grew up as helping each other, belonging to each other. I think that's what helps us to connect with people across all sections of the society.
When you were growing up, was there any major influences in your life? Anybody who was a mentor, someone you drew inspiration from as a youth?
I think 3 people who influenced me very early in my life. One was my grandmother, my father's mother. Second was my father and mother. Third was my mother's father and mother's mother. I think they had a very important role in our lives. The value systems, the ethics, doing good to the society, being nice, being studious all the time, were all ingrained. Mathematics, as an example, was completely ingrained into us.
Is that obviously because dad was in the CA or in the accounts area, and obviously numbers came easier to you as you grew up, I suppose. But again, is it something that you wanted to follow in his footsteps as far as math was concerned?
I think maths was something we liked it because I think we were brought in very early. We were never shy of mathematics or wanted to run away from it. If at all there was a subject which I wanted to run away from, it was chemistry and biology, of course, in later part of my life. But I think we enjoyed doing the mathematics part of it, but enjoyed to a large extent being taught by the teachers and the parents. But I think it was a tough one where it cost us not spending so much time like in tennis or in cricket or something like that.
Growing up, did you watch or enjoy or participate in many sports?
I think I did participate in quite a few sports. For example, taking part in athletics I was very fond of it, running as an example. Second one I was fond of was playing hockey or cricket. These were the 3 sports. Then I took to table tennis for a short while. I think those were my interests. but hardly I played any sports like swimming was never to my liking. I think as I went to the US later in my career, I started liking American football as well as the basketball to a large extent. The last but not the least was ice hockey, which I witnessed when the Americans beat the Russians in 1980.
Yes.
And I remembered when they beat the Russians again in the Sochi Olympics, Sochi Games
Yes.
recently, Winter Olympics, yeah.
Later on, you went to the US, as you pointed out. UCLA is where you
Yes.
went to school for a few years. What was that experience like coming from Nagpur, Tirvarur, as far as Tamil Nadu is concerned, which is your hometown, and then suddenly going to the US at an early age and being in the heart of Southern California?
No, I still remember the day I landed in Los Angeles. The journey was extremely difficult because you don't have the 747s those days. Going by the Boeing 707s and through multiple hops, landing in Los Angeles in the middle of the day. The first thing I wanted was to get hold of some water, and then going into those yellow lines and picking up the bus and then going into the campus. And then with my bag treading along to the international students part of the campus, and then finding a place. And I think the first person I met with, if I recall very clearly, was from Saudi Arabia. He also went through the same process of landing, and both of us traveled together, and both of us were looking for a place. Ultimately, after the first 2 or 3 days, some of the friends helped out, and then we ended up finding a place in Westwood itself, next to the campus.
And your years at UCLA, how would you categorize it as far as not just education by way of academia, but also by way of your relationship to being in the American culture? You know, that's a very multiracial student population there. How did all of that affect you or grip you?
I think the fact that I grew up to a large extent in Delhi, it's a very cosmopolitan society, Delhi, as you know. And that helped us to adjust a bit in the US fairly quickly, unlike you come from a village or you come from a smaller town. But I think the immersion and the experience you undergo is something which I can never forget. I think multi-country, multi-religion, ethnicity differences, but more importantly, accent differences and cultural differences, it's an amazing experience. I think one should not hurry to complete their undergrad or postgraduate program. Even if it took an extra year to do things, even if it took a break for a year, for example, all these things I learned only there. Otherwise, in an Indian context, you are always told complete your studies as quickly as possible, go to the next master's, postgraduate, IAS, take a job, retire. I think that stereotype thing has to change, and that's changing. That's what it taught me.
What would you have said are the major cultural differences there? Obviously, you know, growing up in the south of India and of course in the north as well, where you spent time in Delhi. But more importantly, the cultural changes in India were in the 70s and in the US was open, you know, it was free. Vietnam War just ended in 68. Woodstock had taken place on the East Coast. And all of this sort of freedom that you sort of felt when you were in the US.
I think it's an absolute antithesis of what you are used to. It's complete opposite of what you have been practicing. I think suddenly you find it's a very natural process of interaction with the other sex, as an example. Dating a girl is a very natural process in a Western society. I think expressing your mind and expressing and disagreeing with somebody are some things which you learn very quickly. And I think being silent is not going to take you very far, rather than expressing and then objecting to things or agreeing with things or participating in debates, as an example. I think if you are not willing to practice some of those, willing to get into that culture, you will feel isolated, and that's the problem we face even in a company like TCS. So you got to put those interventions to make sure people feel very comfortable in any culture, because it can play out multiple ways, including some extreme cases of suicides, as an example. So I think immersing in a culture and multicultural experience, multicultural cuisine, interacting with people is something everyone should get used to, must practice. You live in the place like the way people do, Not that you dump your culture, but at the same time interacting in a very, very positive manner and absorbing certain things which are very necessary for growing up.
Were you able to get into that way of life right away? Did it take you a while to
It
kind
took
of
a
get
while,
immersed
it
in
took
it?
a while, but then you had the advantage of a few people you knew. You even had the advantage of if somebody was staying as a paying guest in an American family, as an example, or you had a faculty advisor who used to invite you home, as an example. Instead of shying away from those things, which is a natural reaction, you tend to go there, experience it, and then you find that people are people at the end of the day. Today, if you reflect and look back, some of those friendships which you formed 40, 50 years ago still are the ones which are the strongest relationships, as I see. Their children have grown up, you interact with them, your children interact with them. It's a way of life.
So 1969, you joined as a junior engineer at TCS.
72.
72. Yes. Excuse my year there. 72. And that was actually the year I graduated from university, so I should remember that year. 72, you joined TCS as a junior engineer. Now, why TCS at that point in time?
You know, when I left India, first of all, my parents were very, very worried whether I'm going to come back or not. My mother almost wanted to extract a promise that I'll definitely come back, but I didn't know when I would come back. After I graduated from UCLA, I worked for about a year and a half.
But I'm going to stop you right there, Ram, to ask you one very sort of little bit more personal question about UCLA, because obviously going there, your parents had the right thought in saying, oh, Ram is not going to come back. But so, as we talked earlier, dating was common. I mean, what would have happened had you then met someone that you liked right there? That was what I guess they were concerned about.
If they were concerned about that, probably they would have absorbed it and they would have had to accept it.
Okay.
So I think two things that were ingrained. One is join the government service because it was very well respected. Second was Tata Group is one of the most well-known groups in the country. If both of them don't work out, then you look for something else. So I think having decided that I went in the engineering discipline, government was not the profession for me. And the Tata Group, in fact, they interviewed me in the Bel Air Hotel in Los Angeles. The president of Tata Incorporated flew down from New York, and then he invited me for an interview. And then lo and behold, offered me a job in TCS. And then because my parents wanted, and then I said, I'll come back because let me experience working for the Tata Group.
So when you made that decision to join TCS at that point, did you know it was literally going to change your life?
No, I think first thing was my friends thought I was mad. They said I'm making the biggest mistake in my life. And they thought I will come back within the next year or so. I was leaving a very good job which was paying me very well. They thought I was going to get a green card because the employer wanted to sponsor me for a green card. Checking all this and then saying that I'm going back, they absolutely thought I was really mad. But then I think once you came here, the conditions being very different from what it was in the US and having experienced for almost 3 years the US way of life, even that small adjustment was pretty difficult because you are coming into an environment which has not changed substantially by the time you left. I mean, parts of India today are almost the same which was 50 years ago or 60 years ago. So I think adjustment and adjusting to your bosses was a pretty difficult experience. And more importantly, adjusting to a city like Bombay was extremely difficult because I never lived here. If at all, I recall I had visited it when I was very young, when my grandparents were here. So I think it was a pretty tough decision. But I think as luck would have it, I got married the same year. And then both of us grew up together here, learning the city and experiencing the Tata Group itself.
Ram, we talked about your early years at TCS, joining in 1969. And at that point in time, did you feel that you were going to spend the next 40 years at this company?
I don't think you plan that far ahead for sure. I would be wrong if I told you that was the only direction I was going to pursue. Even during the career in TCS, number of options came because the IT industry was growing so fast. Everybody was wanting to look at a leadership, wanting to get some professionals who had a lot of experience. So I think I shunned all of them away because the next set of challenge or the opportunity within the same company was very much visible to me. If I wanted to do something, I was able to get into that, and I changed multiple operational experiences within the same company. They were all very disruptive in nature. That was not the same thing that you do the same stereotype programming day in and day out. For example, I started with the engineering in terms of maintenance, installation of hardware. Then I went into software programming. Then out of the blue, I said that I will look after the US operations and a marketing and a sales perspective to set up our operations in New York for the first time. Then you came back, then you got into the human resources in terms of allocation of human capital to projects, programs, etc. Then you went into understanding the other aspects of the business. Finally, you came to general management and start driving it. I also looked after R&D for a while so that we grew in multiple. So if you see within the same company, I was able to create a culture of doing multiple things and more importantly, things which I never tried before. I think when an opportunity is created in any corporation like that, I think there is very little reason for you to leave. You may leave, but only for financial reasons. If at all anybody left along with me who joined TCS, invariably somebody else was paying them higher because they thought they needed that. But I think when you have the professional satisfaction of creating something for the future, and your bosses and the institution is permitting that, so long as you generate the profits to plow back into the business, it's a great experience. That's what kept me going. That's what we have tried to create as a culture within the corporation. Pick up good people, build excellence in people, put the infrastructure necessary to train the people, bring the technology that is needed for the future, and ultimately relate to the market. This is the mantra we have been following right through.
So, in that challenging situation where you go to areas of the company that you perhaps were not well versed in but picked it up as you went along, how did you pursue your excellence there? How did you manage to get to the top or earn more profits for the company or continue to face those challenges, amongst the so many people that TCS already had?
I think a few things, if you're a good leader and willing to learn by doing, it makes a lot of difference. You earn the respect of people when you are willing to be a part of one of them, rather than use your position or the designation or the authority. Authority in our case, in my case personally, came from demonstrating that I can do what you can do. You may be better than me, but at least I can do what I can do. And I can bring you certain inputs which may be very valuable to you, or I can learn from you certain inputs which are very valuable. It's a very collaborative relationship and a very professional relationship where hierarchy does not play any part. And that's what helped me to grow, that's what helped my colleagues to grow, that's what we were able to build as a team. And that's one unique culture within TCS which we are trying to keep even as it grows across the world.
So 1996, you become managing director and CEO of the company. And when you became the MD and CEO of this incredible company, it was a $300-400 million business. It had representation everywhere, but you then went on to grow it to a $6 billion entity. Now, I know the IT industry was growing at the time and people were jumping ship from company to company and so on. What were the challenges you faced? What was your thought process to be able to grow this amazing entity?
My first thought process was when I was given this position in 1996. How do I not do the same things my boss did? If I was going to do the same things as he did in terms of driving everything from me and nobody else, we would have probably never grown or we would have folded up by now. The thing which we did was to make sure that empower and decentralize the operations as quickly as possible. But decentralizing and empowerment is very easily said than done because you need to trust the people whom you are going to give the responsibility to, and they need to accept the responsibility to say that I am willing to accept this challenge just like I did when I was asked to go here or there or whatever it is. I think that requires enormous number of connection, enormous number of being together. Virtually we live together for the next 8 to 12 weeks. planning and architecting how we are going to conduct ourselves, how we are going to understand each other, and how we are going to communicate with each other, and how we are going to trust each other. We also brought in some external facilitation mechanisms because academics always play a very critical role in facilitating certain things in terms of questioning some of your assumptions. So I got a professor from Harvard and then tried to bring his capabilities into the dialoguing process, more importantly. It's a dialogue and it's not a diktat. It's a togetherness, which is the community building, and it's ultimately executing, because you can have great strategy, but if you don't implement it or execute it, very quickly learning from the mistakes and correcting those instead of waiting for it to become a big problem. I think that was one of the biggest ways to build excellence in people, one of the best ways to see we can scale up and then face up to the next challenge. But as I said, behind all of this is trust the people, build the process, build the technologies, build the infrastructure proactively so that you are never short of those. And some of our clients helped us in that because they said that we trust you, we are willing to put our bets on you, but we will help you to grow. That's the community and the extended community which I practiced a lot. And the empowerment became very visible because when people from outside talk about, oh, we never thought TCS would do this, because they were experienced to a different TCS at that point in time. Even now I today say that the period of initial incorporation of TCS up to 1996, the person who led the show, Mr. Kohli, was absolutely necessary. Probably I would have been the wrong person at that time. I came in at a time in 1996 where the empowerment and then putting the systems for scale-up was necessary. If somebody else was there, he would not have probably done it. And then when I handed over to Chandra, that was absolutely the point in time in 2009 where he was the right person. So comparisons whether he was better than me, I was better than the previous person are also completely wrong, because the time frames are completely different, and that's the way to look at it.
Need of the moment.
You need of the moment, absolutely right.
Tell me about also TCS going private to public at a certain point, and how do you decide it's ripe for that?
I think there's never a good time or there's never a right time. A lot of people ask me that you're too late to do it, why are you not doing it, and repeatedly ask these questions. This was debated at the Tata Sons board, which was the parent which was owning 100% of the company. But it's the time came when one is, after enormous debate, you decide to go. Second, there are monetary considerations where you want to encash based on the value or the wealth you have created. Still, predominantly, the ownership is maintained by you and you are only diluting a certain portion. But I think the preparation of listing is something which was a very, very difficult task. From a legal due diligence, from the compliance requirements, where to list, whether it's to list in the Indian stock exchanges or the New York stock exchanges or any other part of the world. And are we really ready to face up to this kind of a dialogue? Very, very aggressive dialogues where you are pushed to the limit to say that why are you not performing, or why are you not performing better than this, or what is going to be the next quarter. So it's like you're on a treadmill much more than what you were used to. Then the accountability to more than one shareholder, namely Tata Sons, was very daunting. At the time of listing, we went to 1.1 million shareholders. Today it's about 600,000 shareholders, but predominantly 1.1 million shareholders, you are accountable overnight. I think being a shy person, being not used to this kind of a public display, it took me a while to adjust. And we went through again a preparation. One of the communication experts came and coached us how to deal with. The only simple message he said was, you keep talking what you want to talk, irrespective of the question.
That makes complete sense to me, by the way. Okay, yes.
But I think it is a very humbling experience because you are subject to public scrutiny. You are rewarded for what you do as the right thing, and you are criticized for even the smallest thing. But you have to take it in the stride and not lose sleep over such things, because you are doing your best. At best, you lose your job, which is the worst.
Yes.
So exactly. One shouldn't get worried about these things. You can't spoil your health.
When we talk about your other activities, and you're now, of course, chairman of several companies, vice chairman of several companies, you juggle a lot of things. You're on councils, you're an advisor to the Prime Minister, chairman of the NSDA. How do you juggle all these things?
I think one is, like I said, it's important for the first First thing is the support of your family. Whether it was in TCS, whether it was in these new positions which I have taken up, if they don't support you, you're not going to get very far. Having said that, building a team which you can trust and give the responsibility to is the most important thing. If you have a great team who understand you very well, you need to spend the minimal amount of time before you know things are okay. Behind all of this is the ability to know the real facts on the ground in real time. That comes by either systems in place, technology as a backbone of those systems, and or your ability to visit the locations where the action is happening. So I spend my time between connecting with the people either over email, through the SMSs, through Skype, through video conferencing, and physically being present when there is a need to be present. I think so long as you have the ability to connect with people, you can run multiple things at the same time. But then the second part of the story is mentally you've got to compartmentalize yourself so that if there is an irritating problem on one of the things, you cannot let that stop your functioning in the other one, which is very difficult to achieve. It's like reading multiple things at the same time. We all get used to reading very quickly. We all get used to reading multiple books, completely different subjects. I think you practice it over a period of time. Then once you learn that, you know what kind of time allocation you need for what activity and the kind of people that are behind it and the systems I talked about. But still, sometimes you find that 24 hours are not enough, 7 days a week are not enough. It compromises on some of the things. Like I wanted to take a break for Wimbledon, or I want to take a break for the French Open or Australian Open. One is not able to plan the way I plan my work. So that's the common complaint which I have to address.
NSDA, tell us a little bit something about the NSDA.
I think in the last 2.5 years, the institutional mechanism we have created for scaled up skilling in this country is something phenomenal. The National Skill Development Agency essentially reports into the Cabinet Committee on Skills Development headed by the Prime Minister. And as chairman of the National Skill Development Agency, the responsibility is to coordinate all the skilling activities in the country to a common framework called the National Skills Qualification Framework. At the end of the day, we want to measure outcomes. Outcomes are very simply enabling a youth to get a job and to give an upward mobility through vocational education. Vocational education in this country is always considered as a blue-collar job, but at the same time we complain that I can't get a carpenter, I can't get a mason, I can't get a plumber. And I think we want to bring dignity to this, encourage millions of youth to take up to vocational training, compulsorily introduced in the secondary schools vocational as part of the curriculum, give pathways from the vocational to the mainstream education and vice versa, and essentially empower people through technology, through simulations, through classroom education, and bring the dignity to this. Advocacy becomes a very critical part of this because the parents also have a misconceived notion that doing something with your hand is not good, whereas sitting in an air conditioning office and then enjoying that is a better job. Even social implications of that are very visible, where to get a girl married, they want the boy to be having a degree, even though the degree may get nowhere in terms of a job. So I think the opportunity to touch millions, and the scale of the problem we are talking about is 500 million by 2022. That's the most exciting part of it, and the institutional framework has been set in place. So irrespective of the government that comes after our elections, the institution will survive the test of time and it will only get better from now on.
It's a challenge of immeasurable,
Yes.
the needs are so great in our country, and it's not driven by the urban population, driven by the real India that you see.
And we call it as the greatest human resource exercise in the world, where nothing ever has been even tried out.
You've recently been also appointed as chairman of AirAsia.
Right.
And our good friend Tony Fernandez, who started the company and a real entrepreneur, in my opinion. What made you want to accept this position and also want to help a company like AirAsia to come across the skies in India? Because obviously it's something that's very much needed.
First thing is, I keep questioning whether I did the right thing to get into airline business. Again, just like when I was coming back to India, people said I must be mad. A lot of people said I must be mad to get into the airline business.
Yes.
It's a very murky business.
Yes.
You're doing the biggest mistake of your life.
Yes.
All the good things you have earned is probably going to disappear. So I think
Yes.
first is accepting a challenge is a way of life for me.
Yes.
Second is affordable travel. First time travelers are going to experience something very different at a price point where it's going to be phenomenal experience for the entire family is what we are attempting. We are not here to take away the business for somebody because we are not in this price war where the other guy decreases and finally the organization folds up. So the attempt is to bring in the best of travel experience to first time travelers and to experience so that they have more time with their families and or the business they want to do. Let's hope we get the clearances very soon. We are going through a journey and a process of getting all the compliances done. Once we get the clearances, we are ready to launch. I've seen the facilities of AirAsia in Kuala Lumpur, the low-cost air terminal as an example, including the engineering, including the back-end systems, including the simulators which I had the experience to practice in. I think it's a phenomenal experience and a new learning. I think hopefully this will translate into an experience for people across the country. That's what we are attempting.
Very successful in Asia, and there is absolutely no reason with the growth of the aviation industry in India that AirAsia wouldn't be successful, and especially now with you at the helm. I'm going to digress a little bit and talk about music.
Yes.
And South India and music in general, and your lovely wife Mala's involvement in the arts and culture, especially in the South. I see you traveling everywhere, and Mala's always with you everywhere you go, which is unique because we don't often see that with businessmen traveling everywhere because of times and cities. 2 days in a city, 1 day in a city. How difficult is it for Mala? And obviously, both of you enjoy being together in spite of all of your various meetings and work.
I think it's more difficult for her than I. But the good thing is she has her own set of interests. Music, as an example, is what she taught to me more than I learned. Even though I grew up with music in the house with my sisters, my parents, fond of music. But completely a different form of music, namely the North Indian classical music, is what she learned and what I learned from her to appreciate. I think anything from the liberal arts side, from the arts and culture side, she's so fond of it, including education and physically challenged children initiatives. So I think you begin to appreciate the other dimension, and that's where being together, both of us pursue our own interests, but at the end of the day, we are together. In every city we visit, there is always a room for experiencing any of these. And she, even though is not as fond of traveling as I am, she does enjoy the time she is with me, or I enjoy the time I'm with her. It gives us a very unique experience of experiencing various cultures as we talked about.
Finally, if you were talking about children and youth in India, what advice would you give them as far as their quest and their pursuit of excellence and following their dreams? I mean, certainly the hard work is there, the choices are important, and so on. And how do you encourage them to actually follow their dreams?
I think if a child is passionate about something, irrespective of completely different from your way of looking at things, our responsibility is to ignite that passion without any question. If we give them a forum to ignite their passion, they will seek out and then create a career for themselves. Howsoever different it may be from what you are used to, the stereotype way of thinking and doing the same thing what you did is the worst thing you can do to a youth or a child. Our attempt even in the skill development initiative is create so many opportunities where the child will never be not knowing what to do or what not to do. And if you create those opportunities, they will seek out and multiple pathways to go from one to the other. If I'm appreciating music today, when that's not my primary objective, I can do it with the same passion as my job in the IT industry. If a child wants to be a carpenter or a firefighter as an example, and then follow an engineering degree much later or completely a different discipline, we cannot stand in the way of such opportunities. The youth of the country want to be productively engaged, productively seek out their passion, and more importantly, the appreciation of this and creating opportunities for that is the biggest responsibility we all carry. A social transformation of this country through enablement on the ground with the government and the private sector and the NGOs as a community must fall into place. Connecting these pieces together is the biggest challenge, and that's what we are attempting.
But do you think society permits that, to follow sort of a challenging path, if you want to call it that, but also how we talk about going through school, college, getting a job, an apartment, a car, and then a wife, and so on and so forth, or a husband in that manner? But I know the country has changed over the last 30 years and 25 years since I played a sport, and when nobody thought that sport could be a profession,
Right.
and so on and so forth. And then now, of course, people think they can do it, and then 30 years later. But is the change happening quick enough for our country?
I think because of the scale, it always appears the change is not happening quickly. But the millions who want to be in sports today, as an example, more importantly in tennis or cricket or any other sport, you can see that, and the parents endorsing it is also very visible. To me, the transformation is when you travel across the country into the interior parts and see a child or a parent or at the lowest levels of the hierarchy using a cell phone as an example, and the empowerment they get with the cell phone to communicate with their dear ones, to communicate with anybody, to do the banking transactions tomorrow. These are all empowerment of the masses, and that's where we are going to see an enormous amount of change. And once a particular enablement comes, the scale-up happens very quickly. You saw the penetration of television in this country. You saw the penetration of mobile phones in this country. You're going to see the penetration of internet in this country. Then the learning becomes a completely different way, where the teacher-student way of doing things are not going to be the way of life. It's going to be all of us together learning, irrespective of your age or my age or a child's age. That's the transformation we are wanting and experiencing.
Finally, what do you see for Ramadorai over the next decade?
I think over the next decade, if I can touch millions of youth, and the real change that has brought in where people are having an opportunity to excel in what they do, more importantly to get a livelihood guaranteed, that will give me the most satisfaction. But in the process, if you are going to build multiple professionals, it will be great. But most important for me is spending as much time as possible with my grandson. It's a very unique experience.
Great to see you. My very best to you, to Mala, and to your entire family.
Thank you so much, Vijay.
All the best.
Thank you.